Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot of things to cover today. We have a quiz here in about 45 minutes or so. And I want to start the streams discussion. But first, we're going to go through another round of frequently made mistakes. So this is yet another review of frequently made mistakes I've seen from the assignment 2 submissions that have been sent to me for help and comments. Make sure that you address everything that is described here before you put your initial submission in a few days from now. I think it's Friday, or it won't be reviewed. The point of doing this is so that people can update their code before they submit it, so I don't have to review it multiple times. So a couple things. The current tests are kind of picky about how you name your fields, so make sure that you call them with the naming convention we've been using. This is a variant of what's called so-called Hungarian notation, so please use mpage URI or mdepth instead of page URI or depth. We'll probably fix the test to be a little bit less persnickety here, but that's the way it works right now. When you write your code, please make sure that you put each intermediate operation in a stream on its own line, as opposed to glomming them all together from left to right, because it quickly becomes hard to read because it runs off the end of the page. And make sure you comment each of them. So for each of the different calls, you want to make sure that you have a comment explaining what it's doing. Also, make sure you put the check for mdepth less than max depth or mmax depth first. This is backwards, so it won't pass the test. You don't want to bother doing an expensive call if a cheaper call can be sufficient. And then also, please replace sum with find first dot or else. We'll talk more about that when we get into the streams lectures and explain the idiom that's being used here. Sum implies that you're summing up a group of things. This is just taking one operation, one URI, and then filtering it, and then going ahead and doing some stuff here. So make sure that you use find first, and find first returns an optional, so you need to say or else. Going down to crawl page for URL crawler task, please use the Fluent interface pattern, which basically just says have these things stream together or pipeline together, if you will. So the output of one goes into the input of another, rather than using a bunch of local variables. Again, it's easy enough to comment things by putting them on separate lines. And make sure you call the mwebpagecrawler get page method in the context of the managed blocker mechanism. There's a helper method, as you undoubtedly remember from assignment 1. Make sure you use it here properly. Don't just call it directly, because it could block. Going down to the process page method here in URL crawler task, please do things so that you create the appropriate either URL crawler task or process image task here in map, fork it and add it all within the same place. So don't have map followed by fork. So it all kind of goes here in this one intermediate operation call. That just makes it a bit more concise. Fewer calls having to go through the stream. And you don't need to call filter here to filter out non-nulls. That's only in other situations where you have to do that. So you don't have to worry about non-nulls when you create those things. If they return null, something very seriously has gone wrong. Once again, please make sure you use the naming conventions. We've been following image URI, not image URI. Now let's take a look at the compute method in process task. Once again, I probably should have commented this, but make sure you put the of method on its own line so you can comment it, as opposed to glomming it up here. Let's just say that so that we can have that for completeness. Please put .of on its own line and comment it. Now, in this case, it's possible that null images could be returned, so make sure you filter them out. And this is a simple thing, but it's easy to do because your IDE will do it for you automatically. Please use method references here instead of Lambda expressions. So you can use Android Studio will trivially transform that for you automatically, but it's just a good habit to get into. And again, please use find first and or else rather than sum. Let's take a look at transform image. Once again, please integrate the call to fork up here rather than having it in a separate map operation below. And again, you don't need to call filter here because we're not worrying about null objects. If we've got null objects, it means that new failed, which would be horrible. And just a couple more things, and then I'll happy to take questions. Please combine this stuff so that we have the map, that you're just using filter and you're checking whether join returns null or not. So you can combine these two operations rather than having a map followed by filter, have just filter, which will call join and check to see whether the return value is null or not. And now we're down to the final thing. Please name the fields in the consistent way. And final comment now for this turn of the crank of feedback on frequently made mistakes. Make sure you swap the order so that you do a stream of mTransform instead of mImage. It doesn't really make that much difference, honestly, but the tests like it this way, so it's easy enough to remember. And this particular piece of code was missing the terminal operation, which means the code will never run. We'll talk more about that as we get into streams in a bit more. So you need to make sure you put the right terminal operation. And the terminal operation here should be pretty well established once you take a look at all the other terminal operations we've got earlier in the code.